Hello and welcome to the Brown Sign Project. Today's episode will be hosted by Carly and Carlton, and our guest today is the only Joe Lavery. We are so excited to hear about his career, and also he'll be sharing some top tips on how to get your foot into the tourist attractions industry. Okay, let's start.
Joe is a marine biologist and public aquarium specialist who's worked with some of the industry's biggest brands. He's dedicated his whole career to providing first-rate visitor experience and sharing his passion for animals with the public. Joe, it's lovely to speak to you.
You too, great to be here.
Cool. So we're going to start off with a very short icebreaker, which Carlton's going to lead because I feel like I know you too well. Carlton has to get to know you. So Carlton, off you go.
Awesome. Okay, so it's called This or That, Joe. I'm going to give you two options. You just have to tell me which option you like.
Okay,
No
I love it already.
All right. Okay, so first one is texting or talking?
Oh, talking every time.
Netflix or YouTube?
YouTube.
Hamburgers or tacos?
Oh, it's got to be a taco, surely.
Good. I'm glad you said that because we weren't going to be friends for a minute.
Does that mean I've lost out with Carlton?
No, we're still going. Ariel or Jasmine?
Oh, I think I probably have to say Ariel.
Fish,
just because
right?
of my application. Yeah.
Good choice. And we're going to do our last one, which is dark chocolate or milk chocolate.
This is showing my age. Used to love milk chocolate, hate dark chocolate. I've done a complete 360.
Yeah, you're getting old.
180.
Yeah, maybe not.
No, big lover of dark chocolate these days.
No.
Awesome. That's it. That's our icebreaker session. Easy peasy.
Yeah, anybody who chooses burgers over tacos, no.
Why?
The people not allowed on our podcast. Sorry, everyone, if that's what you were here.
I get to stay. Woo.
You get to stay. Yeah, we continue the interview. That's if you'd have said burgers at that point, we would have just stopped. Absolutely.
Good to know.
Cool. So first question is, and this is a question I guess for everyone because it kind of gives us an insight into who you are as a person, is what did you think you were going to do when you were a child? What was your dream job as a kid?
So for as long as I can remember, I have been obsessed by theatre and acting, and I mean, not just theatre actually, but acting in general. And I always thought I would go into TV and film, and I did when I was a kid. I was in some pretty big films and a lot of TV series and things like that. I was in Pampers adverts when I was like 2.
Wow.
And maybe even younger than that, which I only found out as I got older. And then probably when I was about 14 or 15, the school wrote to my parents and asked them to come in for a meeting, and told them I was missing too much school because I was taking too many days out for TV shows. And so I kind of canned it, and then aquariums came into my life, and I haven't looked back.
Oh wow! And this is why we asked the question, right? Because you just never know what sort of resides in people's past. That's so cool. Awesome. So the next question on our list is what does a normal day at work look like for you today?
So that's super interesting because I think, and as you both probably know, I mean, in the attractions industry, I don't think there's ever a normal day at work. And I've only really worked in attractions other than the odd bit of bar work, and work on maybe research vessels and things like that. And yeah, no 2 days have ever been the same for me, I think. Certainly now I'm self-employed, and one day I could be on Zoom calls or designing sort of filtration or life support systems for an aquarium, and the next day doing my bookkeeping. So my days are quite varied, but I do try to make sure that I go for a run 3-4 times a week, something like that, when we're allowed out to exercise. And I try, at least now while I'm self-employed and not doing the 9-to-5 gig, I try to get out and again see friends and things while we're allowed. But I'm very lucky. I've quite a varied work life.
Yeah, I think the I'd love to have one day. You see these in magazines quite a lot about what, I get up at 5 a.m. or whatever, and I do yoga for an hour, and then I have breakfast. The days of kind of these really productive people. And I'd love to put that with the most of the freelancers and self-employed people I know. Like, I get up around 10. No, that's really harsh. But I think we're also, and when you work for yourself, it's nice actually to be able to choose your day and organize your day how you work best.
Yeah, totally. I mean, talking about that, I saw a YouTube video once where this guy was proper clickbait. This guy was like, my 5 a.m. morning routine for maximum productivity. And it was things like, take a cold shower at 5:05 in the morning. And, it's not for me.
I think just waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning is not for me personally. I mean,
no,
I classify myself as a night owl. So
same.
I'm normally sleeping at that time.
And I'm a real night owl. And that is a question, Carlton, I think to add to our list for future guests is, I'd be interested to know how many people who are self-employed would specify that they're night owls as opposed to, the morning people. Because I bet it's probably quite a lot of us who work better in the evenings.
100%. I mean, I write all my best stuff or do all my best work, past 10 p.m. I get a flash of inspiration at like 1 a.m. in the morning, and then wake up the next day and read through my stuff, and I'm like, wow, I'm a genius.
I think that's good that you still think you're a genius the next day.
Well, I think sometimes I could probably get in my own way a little bit when I'm trying to focus too hard, and actually once I start getting a little bit tired, or I actually just want to get my work done and go to bed, I think it probably ends up slightly better.
Yeah, really cool.
Okay, Joe, I have your next question, and it's all about self-development and progression within the tourist attractions industry. So, do you have any top tips that you can give to our listeners about how they can progress and what they need to kind of self-develop to move into the industry?
Yeah. So I think the first one, and I think somebody gave this advice to me actually a long time ago, was to seek out skills and experience rather than waiting for it. If there's a job that you want, I think a lot of people, myself included in the past, have applied for it and thought, I'll be great once I get into the role and figure out how to do it and get taught. But actually, figuring out how to do some of those things and getting the experience you need beforehand and seeking it out, I think is the best way to do it. Put yourself in a position to get the job or to develop rather than waiting for it to drop in your lap. Networking, I think, has become a bit of a dirty word sometimes. People have very polarizing views of networking. I mean, for me, networking is super important, but there is lots of ways you can define it. So I think getting out there and making connections and meeting people and doing favors for people just because you enjoy it. If you're really into your industry and you're really into your work, then doing things like this, coming on a podcast or helping someone out with a bit of work they might be struggling with, going to conferences and all of that stuff. I think that's really important when you don't expect anything back. And then, who knows where that will lead in the future, sort of pay those things forward. So I think proper networking is really important. And then, the third one would be to be strategic. So something that I've done for a long time is that if there's a job that I want, so in the aquarium world, I always wanted to be an aquarium curator. And so from the age of about 19 or 20, I was on, Indeed and Monster and all of those websites and downloading curator job descriptions and person specs and sitting through for a couple of hours and highlighting all the same words that kept on coming up, the essential and the desirable criteria and all the adjectives and buzzwords. And then for the following few years, I had this table with, this is what you need to have to be a curator, and this is what would be nice to have. And then these are all the words that people use when they're advertising a curator job. And it means that you've got sort of a 3 or 4 year head start, because you can go and make sure you have all those essential criteria and the desirable criteria. And then when you're in the interview, you already know the buzzwords that you need to be talking about. So I'd say, definitely my ultimate top tip, if you're wanting to get into a certain role in the future, is, prepare yourself, find out what people are looking for, and then set about trying to acquire those skills, those essential criteria.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so just oh, sorry.
It's all right. It's okay, no problem. I totally agree with you, Joe. Especially the last one. I think we're too quick to kind of go through job descriptions and kind of like, oh, I like that job, I'll just apply for it, and not really reading and the details of what the job actually includes and what the skill sets you need. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are not getting jobs, because they just don't read the job description properly on there and getting the key words to kind of develop themselves, and making sure that they have got what it takes to do the job and have the examples to show at the interview if they do get selected. So yeah, absolutely bang on that one.
Yeah, and I guess my question was going to be, so part of the reason Carlton and I started this podcast was that I think there's a lot of jobs in the industry that sort of go unnoticed. People don't really think of them as attractions jobs. And I would say, you know, if I said name a career type in a tourist attraction, marine biologist probably wouldn't be one of the first ones that people choose. No. And so I think, can you just explain to it? So you said about having the job of a curator. Could you briefly explain, for those people who've never worked in an aquarium, what that role entails? Because it's a very specific job, but it's vitally important, you know?
Yeah, it's super niche. So, I mean, most people know what a zookeeper does. You know, zookeepers look after terrestrial animals. They feed them, they clean them, you know, clean out the exhibits, and all of the sort of the behind the scenes work that goes into that. It's exactly the same for aquariums, but I think people probably, you know, find it a bit more magical, because aquariums, I think, tend to be more, you know, just it's a totally different world, isn't it? But the role of a curator specifically is to head up the team that looks after an animal collection at an aquarium. So that's everything from the day-to-day husbandry, you know, the animal care, everything from feeding them to making sure that the water that they're swimming in is you know, is clean and healthy, treating animals that from time to time get sick, but also planning new exhibits. You know, curators usually work sort of 2 to 5 years into the future to say, where do we want this aquarium to go? What do we want our collection to look like in a few years? So they have kind of a strategic vision for the aquarium, and then I guess, you know, every zoo and aquarium in the UK falls under the EU Zoos Directive, so they all have to have a zoo license, and as part of that zoo license, it's essential that zoos and aquariums are involved in research and conservation and education. So while usually there's an education team that takes care of that side of things, curators do get involved in that. But I think one of the things that people often overlook is the level to which curators get involved in conservation and research projects, and how that gets integrated into the day-to-day running of the aquarium. And certainly in the UK, there are some really well-respected and well-renowned aquariums. The Horniman Museum in London has got a great little aquarium. And although they've got, I can't remember, something like, you know, 10 or 20 exhibits, maybe even less than that, they are, you know, so well respected around the world for the research that they do in that aquarium, and quite frankly, they put a lot of us to shame. And the work that they're doing on coral reproduction is not, you know, it's not just something that's paying lip service to the zoo license. It's genuinely going to help research scientists and, you know, and conservation efforts in the wild. So it's a really wide-ranging job. And I was very fortunate to have done it in a couple of instances at a couple of aquariums.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I ever did one of my first, if you like, proper jobs within the tourism industry, I was given the role of, we had a birds of prey exhibit in the place I worked. Okay. And in order to comply with that, we had to do the zoo license. And so, you know, I think it was a bit like that. If you're the last in, you get to organise the Christmas party, you know, so I was the last in. So I got to be the person that did all the paperwork. And I just remember thinking, like, no one sees this. Yeah. Like, you know, outside of the people that know what a zoo license application looks like, no one sees that this work goes on, and it's really in depth and, you know, really vital work. And you sort of brush it off because you think, well, it's just, it's just looking after animals. But it's not just looking after animals, is it? It's such a rich kind of vein of what keeps our animal-based attractions open, and it really is really important.
Yeah, completely. And actually, without thinking about it, I glossed over the admin side of it just then as well. You're totally right. Curators are managers. They're doing everything from staff rotas and budget setting through to record keeping. I mean, the admin side of running an aquarium is enormous. We have records that tell you what food was fed to what animal on a given day over its history, which tanks it's been in, if you've moved it around the aquarium, where it came from, who its parents were, any treatments it's had in its life. The amount of records for running a zoo or aquarium attraction are absolutely mind-boggling. But it's, as you say, super important.
Joe, your story is really inspiring, and what I'm really getting out from this is it's all about education and how you are doing loads of research and loads of information gathering, so you can kind of tell a story about these different species and different animals for our guests, and that's kind of you working on the back of house part of the attraction. But then talking about the front of house, we do a similar thing, so where we meet and greet guests and make sure that they've got everything ready for the experience that the back of house team has created for them. So that's amazing, and really, really inspiring to hear.
Do you know what I should say? There's one story that sticks with me that I want to get out there to as many people as possible. So in my first aquarium job, I was working on a rock pool. So it's the the interactive touch pool where kids can come up and touch a starfish or a crab, and I remember working on this rock pool when I was probably about 16 maybe, and there were a group of school kids that came in, and they were riotous. They were all over the place. They're really loud and really excitable. And the teacher came up to me and said, "I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. They're really excitable. They've never seen these animals before." And I said, no worries, that's fine. They're really cool. We'll get them to get the kids to hold the starfish and the crabs or whatever. And she said, yeah, they've never been to the seaside. And that's when it hit me that this class of school kids had never been to the seaside. They'd never seen these animals in the wild, let alone in an aquarium. And that's the kind of responsibility that zoos and aquariums have. Not just education as a buzzword, but genuinely showing people what's out there on our doorstep.
Yeah, and I think it's really difficult to get that across, because I think it's sort of, when you talk about the worldwide aquariums that people know, you kind of get the idea of like, oh, okay, not many people anyway will see a killer whale in the wild. Not many people will see a whale shark in the wild, that kind of thing. But to say there are kids who have never seen a crab, have never seen a starfish, I grew up, that to me is mind-boggling, but I know that I was very fortunate. And I think that's it. It's hard to sort of get your head around that sometimes, that some kids just don't have those experiences. It's really important that we educate them.
Totally. And I think it's easy as well if you're lucky enough to have had those experiences as a kid. I think it's quite difficult to it's quite easy rather to say zoos and aquariums maybe don't have a place, and why are we keeping these animals? But actually there are so many city centre children that don't grow up, and they'd never get the chance to learn about these animals and then go on to care for them and protect them in the wild because they didn't have those experiences. So I think especially now more than ever, zoos and aquariums are really important.
Yeah, definitely.
So far we've talked about your career and what you've done, which has been fantastic, but what I would like to find out and ask you is, what has been your best career advice someone has given to you to help you in your career?
So I started my career when I was at a public aquarium, Blue Planet Aquarium in Chester, sort of near Ellesmere Port in Chester. And I was 15 when I started, just after my work experience. And after a few months, I was working late on a new exhibit, just spending a bit of time volunteering. And one of the managers there said to me, forget any expectations, don't have any expectations about your career. And there was kind of two sides to it. So one was, don't plan to follow a certain career path, because you never know where you'll end up or what you'll enjoy. And I think, that's especially true of people that are obsessed with, let's say, theme parks, and they go and work in a theme park. And actually, if they're laser focused on just working in theme parks, then they might never discover that actually their passion is HR or engineering, and they find that through working in a theme park where they get access to all of those things. So I think, not having too fixed expectations, but then also not expecting things. I've certainly in the past, expected a promotion for a certain job and then been sort of confused why I didn't get it. And it's only years later that you realise, you shouldn't be promoted because you're the longest serving or because you're the one with the experience or the degree. And actually that happened really early on. And that taught me that, you've got to go out and make sure you get the promotion by having the right skills and having the right experiences. So I think, the best career advice ever is to put your expectations to one side and be strategic and make decisions to put yourself in the right positions.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well, about you saying you might have a real passion for theme parks, but then end up, in HR because you find a passion for it. So one of the things that me and Carlton talked about in order to, start this podcast and kind of inspired us to do it, is that Carlton really sort of had an idea that this would be a career he would have, which I don't think is putting words in your mouth, hopefully. No,
you're right.
I got into it totally by accident. So interestingly, Joe, you said about thinking you would be an actor or, you'd have a career, is that I did performing arts at university. So I had really no interest. I didn't know that tourism was a career that would be a career. I had no idea. And so for me, it was, I totally fell into it. And I think that there's a lot of serendipity that you can find in your career that you would have maybe missed out on those things if you weren't a little bit more open to those.
Totally. Yeah. I think being open to opportunities, because they come from all over the place, right? And I've certainly benefited from things falling in my lap or being put in my lap by other people. And being open to them, I think, you can end up in lots of really interesting places.
Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today and sharing your inspirational stories about your career. It's been great. An eye-opener for me, and I've definitely learned some stuff that I didn't know as well. So thank you so much. Carly, it's over to you.
It's been a pleasure. Joe, can you just quickly, before we sign off, can you tell us where people can find you if they want to find more information about you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at josephlavery.co.uk. And if you're interested in aquariums, you can search for Aquariums Explained on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And we're starting a podcast as well. And we're going to have hopefully some really interesting guests on. So if you do get turned on by zoo licenses, then maybe that's the one for you.
So actually maybe there will be an episode in there just about me and you talking about zoo.
I think we should.
All over it. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.